When a woman creates distance, just as something meaningful begins to form, most men interpret it as a loss of interest. They assume attraction is fragile, that it disappears the moment it isn't constantly fed. But human psychology doesn't work that way, especially when emotions run deep. Very often, what looks like avoidance is actually self-protection. It's not that she doesn't care, it's that she cares more than she expected, and that realization unsettles her. Attraction has stages. In the early phase, curiosity and excitement dominate. There's playfulness, lightness, and little emotional risk. But when curiosity turns into emotional investment, the stakes rise. Now something real is on the line. For many women, that moment triggers a defensive response. Distance becomes a way to slow down emotions that feel like they're accelerating beyond control. This is not conscious manipulation. It's the nervous system stepping in to preserve safety. Think about it from a philosophical angle. Humans don't fear pleasure, they fear loss. When a woman begins to imagine a future emotional outcome, attachment, vulnerability, potential heartbreak, her mind looks for ways to regain control. Pulling back gives her space to assess her feelings without being overwhelmed by them. Ironically, the stronger the emotional pull, the stronger the urge to step away and breathe. This is where most men fail, not because they lack value, but because they misunderstand the signal. They respond to distance with pressure, more messages, more explanations, more reassurance. They try to close the gap forcefully, not realizing that the gap exists precisely because emotions have grown heavy. The more you chase, the more you confirm her fear that losing emotional control will cost her stability. Psychologically, safety isn't created by constant presence. It's created by emotional steadiness. When a woman pulls back and sees that you don't panic, don't demand, don't collapse into insecurity, something powerful happens. Her nervous system begins to relax. You become the calm place, not the pressure point. And calm is addictive when emotions feel chaotic. There's also an element of identity at play. Falling for someone requires a temporary dissolution of self-control. Many people, women especially, are socialized to manage emotions carefully, to not lose themselves. When feelings grow too intense, distance becomes a way to preserve self-image. She's not running from you. She's trying not to lose herself inside what she feels around you. This is why reacting correctly matters more than understanding intellectually. You don't need to analyze her every move or decode hidden messages. What matters is how you hold your center. When you remain composed, focused on your own purpose, and emotionally non-reactive, you communicate something without words. I am stable. I am not trying to take anything from you. I am safe to move toward. Paradoxically, this often draws her back, not because you chased her into returning, but because you removed the threat that caused her to retreat in the first place. Emotional attraction doesn't deepen through force, it deepens through space that feels secure. When she senses that she can approach without losing control or losing you, her fear begins to dissolve. So remember this, distance is not always a door closing. Sometimes it's someone pausing at the threshold, gathering courage. And the man who understands that doesn't rush, doesn't beg, and doesn't disappear. He simply stands grounded, knowing that emotional safety invites what pressure always repels. After distance comes confusion, and confusion usually shows up as inconsistency. One day she's warm, present, and engaged. The next day she's slow to respond, emotionally flat, or seemingly distracted. To the untrained eye, this looks like emotional immaturity or games. But inconsistency is rarely random. It's the outward expression of an inner conflict, desire pulling in one direction, self-protection pulling in the other. When feelings begin to deepen, a woman often experiences two opposing forces at the same time. One part of her wants closeness, connection, and momentum. Another part fears what that closeness might cost her: freedom, emotional control, or the risk of being hurt. Inconsistency is what happens when those two forces alternate control. Warmth appears when desire wins. Distance appears when fear regains the upper hand. This internal tug-of-war creates a cycle that many men misinterpret as a test of worth. They assume they need to perform better, be more impressive, or say the right thing to stabilize her behavior. In reality, her inconsistency has very little to do with your value and everything to do with her emotional threshold. You didn't cause the instability. You simply activated feelings that exceeded her comfort zone. Psychologically, this is known as approach avoidance conflict. The same object, in this case you, becomes both attractive and threatening. She moves closer because she wants you, then pulls away because wanting you feels risky. And the more meaningful the connection, the stronger this pattern becomes. Indifference doesn't create confusion. Emotional relevance does. Here's where emotional intelligence matters. When you react to inconsistency with frustration, accusations, or over-communication, you unknowingly intensify the conflict inside her. You become another variable she has to manage, but when you remain emotionally consistent while she is not, you become a stabilizing force. Your steadiness highlights her inconsistency, not as a flaw, but as a contrast. There's also a subtle power shift happening. Inconsistency is often an unconscious attempt to regain control. When feelings grow, control feels threatened. By alternating closeness and distance, she tests whether she can still regulate the emotional pace. If you chase her warmth and panic at her coldness, she learns that your emotional state depends on her behavior. That dependency reinforces her fear. But if you stay centered regardless of her fluctuations, something clicks. Control is no longer necessary. Philosophically, consistency is a form of self-respect. It says, I know who I am regardless of how you feel today. That message lands deeply, especially when someone is internally unstable. Over time, her emotional swings begin to soften, not because you demanded clarity, but because your presence made clarity less threatening. This doesn't mean you ignore her or become emotionally distant yourself. It means you don't overreact. You meet warmth with warmth, distance with calm, and uncertainty with patience. You let her emotions rise and fall without trying to manage them for her. That restraint communicates confidence and emotional maturity far more loudly than reassurance ever could. Eventually, the inconsistency loses its purpose. There's nothing left to test, nothing left to control, and when fear no longer needs to defend itself, desire is free to move forward without interruption. So the next time her behavior feels confusing, remember this: confusion is often the sound of feelings getting louder, not quieter. Your job isn't to stabilize her emotions. It's to remain stable within yourself. At a certain point, distance and inconsistency evolve into something more deliberate. This is where emotional tests begin. They are rarely announced and almost never logical. A delayed reply that feels intentional. A sudden cold tone where warmth used to be. A comment designed to provoke a reaction. Most men experience these moments as rejection. In reality, they are invitations, quiet questions asking whether you are emotionally safe to fall for. When a woman begins to feel deeply, her nervous system looks for evidence of stability. Words are cheap in this stage. Behavior is everything. Emotional tests aren't about dominance or control in the way people often assume. They're about prediction. She is subconsciously asking, if I let myself go here, will this man remain grounded, or will he unravel? Your response becomes data. Psychologically, tests emerge when attachment grows faster than trust. Attraction alone doesn't make someone feel safe. Consistency does. Emotional resilience does. So she introduces moments of friction, not to push you away, but to see how you handle pressure. Will you become defensive? Will you over-explain? Will you chase reassurance, or will you remain composed? Most men fail here because they personalize the test. They interpret it as a statement about their worth rather than a probe of their stability. The moment you argue with the test, you've already failed it. Because the test was never about winning. It was about not needing to win at all. There's a deeper philosophical layer at play. Human beings are drawn to what feels anchored. In uncertain emotional terrain, we seek the one thing that doesn't move. When you remain calm in the face of emotional turbulence, you become that anchor. You signal that your sense of self is not dependent on her mood, approval, or behavior. And paradoxically, that independence creates emotional closeness. This doesn't mean emotional detachment. Detachment is indifference, and indifference kills connection. Emotional stability is different. It's presence without pressure, engagement without anxiety. It's responding, not reacting, a calm reply instead of a defensive explanation, a steady tone instead of emotional intensity. Silence when silence is appropriate without resentment or punishment. Tests often escalate when they don't work. If she doesn't get the reaction she expects, she may try again, slightly stronger. This isn't manipulation, it's curiosity. She's calibrating. And every time you remain centered, you communicate a powerful truth. I don't collapse under emotional weight. That truth is deeply reassuring to someone afraid of losing control. Over time, something shifts. The tests become fewer. The tension softens. Not because she decided to stop testing, but because the answer became consistent. Safety has been established. The nervous system no longer needs proof. Here's the mistake to avoid confusing emotional strength with emotional distance. You don't withdraw to pass a test. You stay present. You simply don't overinvest in the outcome of every interaction. You let her emotions be hers. That respect for her process and your own boundaries creates trust faster than any declaration ever could. When a woman senses that she can express uncertainty, fear, or even confusion without destabilizing you, a door opens. She no longer needs to protect herself from her own feelings. And when protection dissolves, vulnerability becomes possible. So remember this, emotional tests are not obstacles to connection. They are gateways. They appear when feelings deepen and fear follows close behind. And the man who passes them doesn't do so by trying harder, but by standing steadier. Even when a woman creates distance, something interesting often happens beneath the surface. Her attention doesn't disappear. It sharpens. She may stop initiating conversations, take longer to reply, or act as thou. She's emotionally removed, but she's still watching, quietly, carefully, from a distance. This behavior confuses many men because it contradicts the surface narrative. If she's pulling away, why is she still paying attention? The answer lies in unresolved emotional attachment. When feelings are strong but fear is stronger, observation becomes a compromise. Watching from a distance allows her to stay emotionally connected without fully surrendering control. She gets to feel close without being vulnerable. It's emotional involvement with a safety buffer. Psychologically, attention follows emotional investment. We don't monitor what we don't care about. When a woman checks your social media, asks mutual friends about you, or suddenly appears where you didn't expect her, it's not coincidence. It's curiosity fueled by attachment. Distance hasn't erased her interest. It's intensified her need to understand you without risking herself. There's also an element of reassurance here. When feelings grow, uncertainty grows with them. She wants to know who you are when she's not around, how you live, how you behave, whether your world continues with or without her presence. This observation phase is her way of assessing emotional safety without direct exposure. Many men make a critical mistake at this stage. They try to pull her attention back aggressively. They post for reactions. They send indirect messages. They attempt to provoke jealousy or force engagement. But this misunderstands the nature of what's happening. She's already engaged, just not openly. Forcing visibility turns observation into pressure, and pressure is exactly what caused the withdrawal in the first place. Philosophically, this moment is about dignity. A man who lives his life fully while being observed communicates something rare, self-containment. He doesn't perform for attention. He doesn't alter his path to be seen. He simply continues. That consistency becomes magnetic. It tells her that your identity is stable, not reactive. When she watches and sees that you remain grounded, focused on your purpose, emotionally centered, unaffected by her distance, her fear begins to lose credibility. The narrative she told herself that closeness would lead to loss of control starts to crack. Because here you are, not chasing, not withdrawing, not punishing, just being. There's a quiet intimacy in being watched. It means she's imagining, projecting, placing herself mentally into your world. This is often when emotional attachment deepens the most, because imagination fills the gaps that presence cannot. And imagination, when left undisturbed, tends to idealize. Your role here is subtle but crucial. You don't reward the distance, and you don't punish it. You remain accessible but not available on demand, open but not reaching, calm but not cold. This balance creates a psychological pull that's far stronger than pursuit. It allows her to move closer at her own pace without feeling cornered. Eventually, observation becomes unsatisfying. Watching is a temporary solution to fear, not a permanent one. If emotional safety continues to be reinforced by your behavior, distance loses its function. Curiosity turns into courage, and courage turns into action. So understand this clearly. When she watches you from a distance, she's not gone. She's negotiating with her feelings. And the man who doesn't flinch under observation, who doesn't seek validation or disappear out of pride, becomes the one she feels safe stepping toward. As feelings intensify, something subtle but important begins to happen. She doesn't lose affection, she restrains it. Compliments become fewer. Emotional openness narrows. Warm gestures are carefully rationed. To many men, this feels like emotional withdrawal even. Punishment. But in reality, it's often an attempt to regain control when emotions start feeling too powerful. when a woman realizes she's becoming emotionally invested. Vulnerability suddenly carries weight. Affection is no longer casual, it feels consequential. Every smile, every soft word, every moment of closeness feels like a step closer to surrender. And surrender, when fear is present, feels dangerous. So she suppresses expression, not because the feelings are gone, but because they're growing faster than her sense of safety can handle. Psychologically, this is an effort to self-regulate. Affection releases emotional attachment. It deepens bonds. When attachment feels overwhelming, the mind looks for ways to slow it down. Restraint becomes a form of emotional braking. She's telling herself, if I don't express it, maybe I can manage it. But emotions don't disappear when they're unexpressed. They intensify internally. This is where many men misstep. They respond to reduced affection with insecurity or entitlement. They ask, why aren't you as warm as before? Or what changed? They try to pull affection back out of her, believing it's something owed. But affection that is demanded stops being safe, and safety, not intensity, is what allows love to grow. There's also a deeper identity issue here. Many women are conditioned to believe that showing too much affection too soon makes them vulnerable, replaceable, or emotionally exposed. When feelings deepen, restraint becomes a way to preserve dignity. She's not punishing you. She's protecting herself from feeling foolish, dependent, or out of control. Your response at this stage matters more than you realize. When you don't chase affection, don't guilt her for restraint, and don't withdraw in resentment, you communicate emotional maturity. You show her that closeness doesn't trap you, and distance doesn't threat. And that balance is rare and deeply reassuring. Philosophically, love requires freedom. The moment affection feels like an obligation, it loses its meaning. When you allow her to regulate her expression without pressure, you give her permission to feel without fear. And when fear dissolves, expression naturally returns, stronger, more authentic, and less guarded. This doesn't mean you become emotionally unavailable. It means you don't turn affection into currency. You don't measure her interest by how much she gives in the moment. You trust the process. You remain warm, present, and grounded without demanding reciprocity on a schedule. Over time, something shifts internally for her. The restraint becomes exhausting. Suppressing affection requires effort. And when she realizes that expressing it doesn't cost her control or you, it begins to flow again, this time with more confidence and depth. Not rushed, not defensive, but chosen. The man who understands this doesn't panic when affection dips. He sees it as a sign of emotional weight, not emotional loss. He knows that what is restrained is often what matters most. So remember this, when she holds back affection, she's not pulling away from you. She's wrestling with the depth of what she feels. And the man who allows space without withdrawing love becomes the one she feels safe giving it to fully. At the core of everything you've heard so far lies a single truth. Fear and desire often grow together. When a woman finds herself emotionally pulled toward you, she doesn't just feel attraction. She feels the weight of what that attraction could become. And until she resolves that tension inside herself, her behavior will continue to move in waves. This final stage isn't about signals, tests, or distance anymore. It's about time. Time to reconcile what she feels with what she fears. Falling in love requires a form of surrender. It means letting go of control, certainty, and sometimes even identity. For someone who values emotional composure, that surrender can feel like a loss rather than a gain. So she pauses. She steps back, not to escape, but to think, to integrate, to decide whether what she's feeling aligns with who she believes she must be. This is why forcing clarity too early almost always backfires. When you push for answers, labels, or reassurance before she's internally ready, you shortcut her process. And when someone feels rushed into a decision they haven't emotionally resolved, fear wins. Distance becomes permanent instead of temporary. Psychologically, people need autonomy to choose freely. Love that feels chosen is empowering. Love that feels cornered becomes threatening. When you give her time without punishment or pressure, you demonstrate respect, not just for her feelings, but for her agency. That respect builds trust at a level words never reach. Here's the paradox: by not demanding a decision, you often make one possible. When she sees that you are not hovering, not waiting anxiously, not suspending your life in anticipation, she experiences relief. Your groundedness gives her room to move toward you rather than defend herself from you. This is where your purpose becomes essential. A man with direction doesn't stall emotionally while waiting for validation. He continues building his life, engaging his goals, and honoring his values. That forward motion signals something powerful. I am whole with or without this outcome. And wholeness is deeply attractive because it removes emotional burden. Philosophically, this is the difference between attachment and alignment. Attachment clings, alignment allows. When she senses alignment, when she feels that choosing you doesn't require sacrificing herself, fear begins to dissolve. She no longer has to fight her emotions. She can let them lead. Over time, the internal conflict quiets. What once felt overwhelming becomes familiar. What once felt dangerous begins to feel grounding. And when that shift happens, her behavior stabilizes naturally. No tests, no distance, no restraint, just presence. Your role through all of this has never been to convince her. It has been to remain consistent, emotionally steady, and self-directed, to offer connection without pressure, to allow desire to mature without interference. This kind of patience isn't passive, it's disciplined. So if you take one thing from this entire message, let it be this. When a woman is afraid of falling for you, your calm is the invitation she needs. Not words, not pursuit, not persuasion, just stability.